là-dessus. Alors, je vais passer pour l'instant à côté de moi Laurent Timsit.
So I'll throw it over to Laurent Timsit, a representative from Air France KLM for policy relations.
Laurent, alors, on a entendu
So, Laurent, we've heard the prospects and the viewpoints from across the board, but here you can bring the perspective of a global airline with operations in many, many different countries worldwide. And how does Air France KLM tackle the question of what the airlines need in terms of policy and support from government? Thank you, Paul. I think that during the previous roundtable, these questions were partly discussed, but quite clearly, we are facing a climate emergency. This climate emergency needs to be handled as best we can, but there is some good news, and we've heard that several times over the last 2 days. Solutions exist. Solutions that work to decouple growth in air traffic from growth in emissions. And so roadmaps were articulated by IATA or European associations. And so we know the levers for decarbonization. Laurent and Patrick talked about them earlier. We need to decouple the growth in air transport from the climate emergency. So there are sustainable fuels, green planes, green aircraft, improvement in air operations. So we know what we need to work on. But now the real question is whether we are able to work on that at the global scale. So what we fear as an airline operating in various parts of the world is that we're going to end up with a situation where each individual regulator is going to put their own solutions forward without necessarily some coordination, possibly with some overlap. And so beyond the issue of the effectiveness that we can have questions about when it comes to measures that are not coordinated between the various regulators, that could lead to competitive distortions. And as an air operator, we're quite sensitive to that. And if the revision in regulatory frameworks was to lead to carbon leaks, that won't be good for the environment because emissions are not going to be reduced. And there are some airlines that may end up, and maybe some countries, some airlines that may lose out in the end. So our appeal is really an appeal for regulation to be as global as possible. Michel Wackenheim talked about ICAO, and of course that's the obvious forum to develop such global regulations. But beyond that, it's really important for regulators worldwide to coordinate their actions and to meet around the ideas and roadmaps that are now emerging. So I think that it's about adding a bit of direction to all that. It's complicated, it's difficult, yet it's necessary. And beyond that, of course, maybe the last message I would have as a global airline is that market-based mechanisms are all well and good, but to me, market-based mechanisms should be a last resort. It's only if we are not able to decarbonize air transport with the other solutions that then market mechanisms can bring the last contribution. But if you're trying to go through market-based mechanisms first, I don't think it's the right solution. That's what I could say about this first thing, Paul. Yes, it's very interesting, and I think that it's fully in line with what we've been hearing in the first roundtable.